Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Steve and Dave's 50 years ago this month. Steve, what chart are we talking about this month?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the chart that comes from June 13th, 1970, mid-June. 1970, it's a, still a tumultuous time in the United States. It's the start of another long, hot summer in the U.S. We are just a month removed from, for example, the Kent State incident, the Kent State massacre, if you will. And interestingly, in June, the chancellor of Kent State University calls back all of the seniors to a graduation ceremony. And so the school had been shut down, but yet they bring the seniors back to the stadium, a closed stadium, and they have a bizarre, undoubtedly a bizarre graduation ceremony. It's just, there's something in the air in 1970 that's just particularly peculiar. But what do we have? Okay, so let's think about the charts a little bit, what's on the radio, and let's just start with number one. Obviously, an essential group from the 60s, we're moving into the 70s, kind of to some degree, sort of their last gasp as a group. So what's at number one, Dave?
That's right. We are looking at, we're going to be looking at the Beatles. And just a second, I ordered something from UPS for this.
Oh, goodness. So we have props this week. It's quite exciting. So as Dave hunts for the UPS box, this, by the way, is unparalleled show preparation. But what do we got? So
this is the, I'm going to unpack now. This is the stuff for Long Winding Road. And oh my, there's quite a bit in here. And For You Blue. So that's the number one single.
Right.
Paul McCartney wrote this Long and Winding Road. Let's start with that. And he wrote it kind of as a ballad for the piano. He actually imagined someone like Ray Charles singing it. He was
absolutely, yeah.
And Ray Charles did actually end up covering it at some point.
So,
but imagine that, you're writing a song and you think, oh, this could be good for Ray, with the realistic expectation that he will probably do it. How many composers have that kind of clout?
No, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and so, but it's interesting that the song, it sounds like a McCartney kind of solo number in a way. I mean, interestingly, as the last sort of offering the Beatles have to the world to some degree, it comes across, I mean, it's essentially, it's a solo effort, right?
Well, yeah, and it certainly would have come across even more so. Left to his devices, but that's not how it worked out.
Yeah.
Just a second. He actually offered this to Tom Jones first, with the condition that it would be the next single that Tom Jones put out. But since Tom Jones, since the record company had already had Without Love in the starting blocks for him, he had to turn it down.
No, this has been a great number for Jones. He would have.
I think so. Yeah, I think he could have done it.
Yeah, it'd been something. Yeah.
Anyway, so the Beatles end up doing it after all. Paul on piano, John on bass, which is going to become an issue.
John.
Bass obviously was not his. Paul usually played bass. Ringo on drums, George on lead guitar, and Billy Preston on Rhodes piano.
The fifth Beatle.
The fifth Beatle, one of the fifth Beatles.
One of them, yeah.
And anyway, so that was the original recording, was in that lineup. And Glyn Johns was in charge of the whole Get Back sessions, and the Get Back sessions became the Let It Be album and film.
Now, so the time frame, so Glenn Johns, which is not the normal producer, this would have been, this is 69, right?
69, we're talking January 69 here.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was never really clear to me why George Martin was not involved with Let It Be, but from the things that I've gleaned, apparently he no longer wanted to work with the Beatles in the state that they were in.
Yeah, I mean, more comment on the disharmony in the group.
Yeah, right. And Lennon was addicted or becoming addicted. Yoko was hanging out at every session, and these were just things that Martin at some point just didn't want to deal with anymore.
Which is, I mean, okay, so to that point though, right? If you think about it, I mean, George Martin recognizes that, you know, the Beatles, I mean, this is going to be, he recognized this is going to be his high water mark of his career. But it must have been really bad. It must have been a really bad vibe to just say, yeah, I think I'll take a pass on this one, fellas. I mean, just given, you know, the success that they had and just, you know, understanding sort of the cultural moment. He just said, no, thanks. That's a bad vibe in the studio. Has to be.
Yeah, exactly. And fortunately, although Let It Be was the last album that was released, it was not the last album that was recorded. So the Beatles got their shit together one last time for Abbey Road. Got Martin.
Yeah.
Paul called him and said, "Hey, we want to do an album like we used to do it. Want to get back and be harmonious in it."
Absolutely.
Martin asked, "Do you all feel that way?" "Yes, we do. Even John."
Even John.
Even John. So yeah. Fortunately, Abbey Road was made after Let It Be. All right, back to Long and Winding Road. The Beatles weren't quite satisfied with what Glenn Johns was doing with the production, and I read that as John Lennon was not quite satisfied. So
yeah. So
Lennon brought Phil Spector in to produce the rest of the album that had largely already been made, but he was to produce it and finish it up. Finish it up after essentially the Beatles were just sick of it. They just didn't want anything more to do with it. So
yeah,
he brought Spector in, basically got Spector out of semi-retirement. He hadn't done anything for a number of years. And he came in and Long and Winding Road was recorded, or rather the overdubs for the production that Spector was doing for his Wall of Sound were done on the last date of any Beatles recording, and that was actually only Ringo Starr was there. Everybody else was sessions players, but he brought in a choir and a little orchestra, 8 violins, 4 violas, 4 cellos, 3 trumpets, 3 trombones, 2 guitars, a woman's choir with 14 women singing.
And wait for it.
Partridge in a pear tree.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And that doesn't even include the harps. And apparently there were harps because everybody talks about the harps.
Harps. We say anything about harps. Yeah, I mean, it's just so classic Spector, right? I mean, it's just, to some degree, it's just over the top. It's just, you know, every instrument imaginable, everything mixed to the front. And there is a certain kind of over the top quality to Long and Winding Road that some people find a little grating.
All right, yeah, and we'll talk about that. But they also did Mine Be Mine on that day, and the third song.
Yeah.
The point is, they had all this in here, and Spector was being his usual neurotic self.
Oh my God.
Running around the studio, popping pills. He had his bodyguard with him because you never know. You had to be. He was just a paranoid guy and driving everyone nuts.
Yeah. Which is, yeah.
That the orchestra refused to play at one point just because he was demanding everything. Anyway, typical
Spector being Spector. Yeah.
Spector being Spector. They got it in the can, and Spector then sent acetates to all the Beatles and just said, "Okay, are you all right with this?" And got their telegrams back. Yes, thumbs up, go with it. Like I said, they were pretty much just sick of it. He even asked the Beatles after he had finished if any of them wanted to help him finish the production. They all passed.
They were, yeah.
They were done. So that session, April 1st, April 2nd, Spector sends acetates. April 9th, Paul McCartney breaks up with the Beatles per press release. Actually, the press release was about the release of his first solo album, McCartney.
Yeah, a regrettable move, right? I think that
yes,
if McCartney were to do it over again, he certainly wouldn't have handled it that way. And it sort of cemented his reputation as, well, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, a lot of people have never really forgiven him for that.
I think that's right.
On the 14th of April, McCartney sends a letter to Alan Klein demanding essentially that The Long and Winding Road be redubbed. Remove the harps, tone down everything else, and get that done before it's released. Well, Let It Be was already in production, so Alan Klein just basically ignored that. And Let It Be and The Long and Winding Road went out, as were, they were released on May 8th, the album, and May 11th, Long and Winding Road, as Spector had dubbed it.
As he dubbed it, yeah. So a month later, essentially a month later, Long and Winding Road is at the top of the charts, the U.S. charts.
Right.
Per usual in terms of the Beatles release, this, many of their singles just skyrocketed to the top. And Long and Winding Road was no exception.
Right, and this was their last #1 hit, their 20th #1 hit, since their first #1 hit in 1964, which was what?
Well, please please me.
Well, good guess, not right. February 1964, I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Of course.
So they had, in just the time period of 74 months, they had 20 #1 hits. That's a #1 hit every 3.7 months.
Yeah,
incredible.
Unparalleled success. I mean, we'll never
yes.
say anything
all-time record. So,
for sure.
So there's that. The Phil Spector production of The Long and Winding Road became a point of contention in the Beatles dissolution court case, one of the 6 points that McCartney brought. And so clearly he wasn't happy, and he wasn't happy until they recorded or rather remixed Let It Be as Let It Be Naked, 2003, where he finally got rid of all of the Spector stuff.
Right. So 3 decades later, they get it right, according to McCartney.
McCartney was not the only one that thought the Spector stuff was terrible. Martin said it was uncharacteristic.
Yeah.
Glyn Johns clearly had a bone to pick. Said it was revolting, puke. And we had a couple others, Richard Williams and blames Spector's orchestrations for the Bacharach atmosphere. The strings add a fullness in places, but intrude badly near the end, and the harps are too much.
I don't disagree. Yeah, I mean, I don't particularly care for the track at all in the Spector version, and frankly, that album, I don't know if it's my least favorite Beatles album, but I feel like I have to cherry pick quite a bit to find stuff that I really enjoy.
Well, I like a lot of the stuff that you don't like on the album. I like Let It Be. I like Long and Winding Road. But I understand when people don't. Mendelssohn of Rolling Stones said, quote, Spector rendered the Long and Winding Road virtually unlistenable, with hideously cloying strings, a ridiculous choir that served only to accentuate the listlessness of Paul's vocal and the song's potential for further mutilation at the hands of the countless schlockmongers who will undoubtedly trip all over one another in their haste to cover it, end quote.
Harsh but fair.
Harsh but fair.
Okay.
Yeah. But, you know, there's a lot of people that disagree.
Absolutely, of course. Yeah.
Well, okay. In his own defense, Spector said, I had no choice because the bass that Lennon was playing was so god-awful. Yeah. I had to cover it any way I could. So Ian MacDonald, this Beatles scholar, said, quote, it features some atrocious bass playing by Lennon, prodding clumsily around as if uncertain of the harmonies and making many comical mistakes. Lennon's crude bass playing on the Long and Winding Road, though largely accidental, amounts to sabotage when presented as finished work.
That raises as many questions. I mean, yeah, I mean,
right?
Given the fractured nature of their relationship at this point. I mean,
largely accidental.
Yeah, accidental.
Maybe unconscious, but yeah.
Let me muck this up. Yeah, well.
Nevertheless, the Long and Winding Road is MacDonald's favorite McCartney song. And it's also the favorite Beatles song of someone we know. He wrote a review for Mojo in 2006 for their 101 Greatest Beatles Songs issue, and said it's his all-time favorite Beatles track. He said, when they broke up, I was heartbroken. I think they should have kept going. Who are we talking about here? This is somebody that had a mutual fan club with Paul McCartney.
Elvis Costello.
A mutual fan club. Was Costello even on the music scene in 70?
Okay. Joe Cocker. No.
No. Okay. So we're talking about Brian Wilson of the Beatles.
Oh, Brian Wilson, of course. Yeah. I guess they had a mutual
right, so,
yeah, of sorts. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, McCartney said Pet Sounds inspired him to do the Sgt. Pepper's project. He said he felt like that had to be answered. So
in 1970, Brian Wilson, by that time, fully in full-blown
schizophrenia. Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't mean that that's what he wrote the article, though.
Oh, fair enough. You're right. Okay.
Okay, so that's, and of course the fans. This is released just a couple weeks after the breakup.
Yeah.
Melancholy song, talking about a love lost, but not irrevocably. The road will always lead me here, lead me to your door. So maybe there's a chance of reconciliation sometime in the future. So it's kind of speaking to all of their mourning, all of their yearning, and it has become yeah, just a real classic, and it's something that McCartney plays at like every one of his albums. It's an
Yeah. It's certainly, you can't hear McCartney live without hearing this song. I mean, I think to some degree, right, it is very much associated with the breakup. It's also, I think, on some level become a kind of secular hymn, like several of the Beatles songs near the end of their career.
like Let It Be.
Like Let It Be, yeah, for sure. But
All right.
Yeah.
So that's one half of this single that charted number one.
Yeah, the flip side.
The other half is For You Blue, written by George Harrison as a love song for Pattie Boyd.
Yeah.
Just as Something in Abbey Road was a love song for Pattie Boyd, and just as another song not written by Harrison was a love song for Pattie. She launched more love songs than Helen of Troy.
Absolutely, yeah. She was okay. So at this point, she is they're still
married.
Still together. But Pattie Boyd will soon leave Harrison for Clapton. This is, I think,
comes Clapton's views for what songs? There are at least a couple of songs that we can.
Well, one certainly. So from the Derek and the Domino sessions, certainly I think Layla was a song that was inspired by her on some level.
Absolutely. And the other song was Tonight, not Perfect Tonight.
Oh, you look, you look wonderful.
Wonderful Tonight, right?
Yeah, Wonderful Tonight, yeah.
So.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's also written for Pattie Boyd.
Both those songs are better than For You Blue, but anyway. No, seriously, it's just not. Yeah,
it's a simple 12-bar blues, blues style. Probably the most interesting thing about it is the slide guitar that Lennon is playing. It's supposed to be kind of a fun song, not too serious. He wanted kind of the honky-tonk feel to the whole thing. So there's that.
But it's what's interesting, if I could. But what's interesting about it is that it is such a lesser song than Long and Winding Road. And the Beatles, particularly at the end of their career, were releasing singles that were essentially double-A singles, right? But both songs were like they were memorable. In fact, most cases, both songs rocketed up the charts. I mean, there's clearly a kind of A and B side here, and so I think.
Well, the interesting thing about this is for Let It Be, Lennon and McCartney were basically just shitting on all of Harrison's stuff.
Yeah, this is a bad time.
Harrison had spent the last part of '68 in the States. He had been jamming with Bob Dylan and the band. Had gone out and done some work with the Wrecking Crew in Los Angeles, and was just enjoying camaraderie with colleagues who respected him and were just treating him as another talented musician.
Absolutely.
And then he gets back January 1969, and oh no, we're not going to record that. And just all of his more substantial stuff was just being shit on. Fortunately, that changed for Abbey Road before Abbey Road came along. Some of his most significant work in the Beatles is found on that album. But here we're left with something like this.
And so at this point,
the atmosphere.
Harrison is stockpiling his songs. As you're suggesting, I think accurately, he's not getting any love from anybody else in the Beatles. So he's stockpiling these songs. Eventually, then in the early 70, 71, All Things Must Pass, his first solo recording. Well,
a 3 LP.
It's 3 LP. Oh. Yeah. And it's just like.
I have some backlog that needs to get taken care of.
It has, right. It has, and parts of it certainly sound like it, but it just, right. And so he's a very prolific songwriter at this point, but it's just not getting much attention. And so.
All right. Just real briefly, when we look at Let It Be, the film, we see a lot of tension there. The idea, the whole thing was that it was going to be the Get Back sessions, the Beatles getting back to their roots kind of as a live rock band.
Sure,
and
absolutely.
To be writing and working on songs that could be played in concert. And then they wanted to present the new songs, the new album, as a concert, as live music. That was the idea, and that was all going to be on film then. And so in Twickenham, they were at essentially a film studio. It was cold, it was large, and it was just a terrible atmosphere. And that kind of mirrored what was going on in the group as well. At some point, Harrison just sick of, in this case, McCartney's overbearing attitude, left the studio, and he was only able to be brought back. The only thing that he agreed on was we'll go ahead and continue it, but we're giving up the concert idea, and it's going to be at Abbey Road.
The home studio, yeah.
The home studio. And you mentioned Peter Jackson has essentially done the Let It Be film or reworked material.
Yeah, he's reworked it, yeah. So there were hours and hours and hours, right, filmed. As you suggest, the film, when it was released in the 70s, it just showed a very fractured group, very tense. And it was uncomfortable viewing a lot of it. But Jackson had got access to the tapes. He suggested, in fact, if you look deeper into the tapes, that there's a lot more harmony. There's a lot more joyousness. There's a stronger sense of brotherhood. And so he's reworked it, and apparently that film will be released here in the next few weeks. Who knows how this is all going to play out given the pandemic? But yeah, and so it'll give us a different take on these on this recording session.
Well, my guess is that a lot of that material is then taken from after they returned to Abbey Road. Apparently, it was like in terms of just attitudes and things like that.
Yeah, even McCartney himself, who's seen, I guess, the rough cut of the new film, says it's just a complete reworking. I mean, it reminded him of so much that was joyous about working with the lads. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
I wonder too if it wasn't just that experience of, well, we really can. It does work. It still works with us. After returning to Abbey Road, if that wasn't what actually led them to take one more shot, the studio album with Abbey Road, with George Martin, just speculation, but
that seems plausible to me. So what we have here in mid-June 1970 is yet another Beatles #1, but in many ways, sort of, this is the
last one. Yeah, it's the swan song. Okay, for #2, what do we have?
Yeah, #2 is a Canadian group, the Poppy Family. Which Way You Goin', Billy? The Poppy Family was a group formed in the late 60s in Vancouver. The principal members were Terry Jacks and Susan Jacks, but Susan Jacks emerged as kind of the star of the group. And so billing for the Poppy Family, for example, on this single, is the Poppy Family featuring Susan Jacks. Susan Jacks became she had a couple more hits as a solo act. She left the group in the early 1970s. And even today, Susan Jacks in Canada is a well-known figure, somebody who appears in variety shows and things like that. And she's a figure of some renown. Terry Jacks, her husband at the time in the Poppy Family, had his great kind of moment with in 1974 with the single "Seasons in the Sun," which is okay. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but
I loved it back in the day.
I did too, actually. I was really smitten with it. It just, but I guess the Poppy Family in the United States, while they did have a couple of other hits, essentially kind of a one-hit wonder. I know, though, Dave, that the Which Way You Goin', Billy is a kind of a favorite of yours. I mean, what is it about the song that sort of struck a chord with you?
Well, I don't know. A favorite of mine might be overstating, but I did like the song. I still like the song. And I think it's a cautionary tale of the times. You know, it's free love is fine, but why marry the cow when you can get the milk for free? And,
There is that, yeah.
you know, and this young girl who is clearly in love with Billy has to just kind of watch him leave her for someone else, and she's sad about it. Where are you going, Billy? But she knows that he's leaving her.
That's it. Yeah. So you have which way you going, Billy? Peaks at number 2. Doesn't get any higher than this. At number 3 in mid-June is Ray Stevens. Speaking of hymns, Everything is Beautiful. This song will hang around the charts for a long time in 1970. So you have Ray Stevens kind of call for reconciliation and love, which is very unusual in the context of what other things that Ray Stevens has.
Yeah. I kind of place this with other songs like to Teach the World to Sing.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
You know, Make Your Own Kind of Music, that corner.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and so this era, you know, pop music is awash in these kinds of songs, and so you have Everything is Beautiful at 3. At number 4 on the Tamla Motown label, you have Rare Earth in their version of Get Ready.
Get Ready. Get Ready is actually a cover of the Temptations song. Steve, who was it written by?
Marvin Gaye.
Well, it's a good guess. It is one of the big hitters from Motown, Smokey Robinson.
Of course, there you go. Yeah.
For the Temptations, peaked at number 29 in 1966. The interesting thing about this is that this was actually a point of negotiation between Berry Gordy and Norman Whitfield, who would go on to produce a number of Temptations.
Absolutely, yeah.
And he said, "Look, if they don't really hit it with Get Ready, I want to produce the next single. I want it to be Ain't Too Proud to Beg." And since it peaked at 29, he got his shot.
He got it. He shot.
And Smokey Robinson was out of the picture after that for the Temptations. So that's one reason why this song is significant.
Yeah.
The reason is because Rare Earth was the first white group that Motown signed. They wanted to create a label for white groups.
Yeah.
And that label became Rare Earth. They didn't have a name for it, and the group just said, "Why don't you just use our name?" So they did. So Get Ready appeared on the Rare Earth label, and it's a fantastic little song. I was surprised to find out that these guys were white. I watched it on YouTube, and because I had always heard black people singing this, and just assumed that Rare Earth was another one of the Motown black groups.
Yeah, and
the single clocks at 2:48. So just basic your radio single. Mm-hmm. The album version was 21 minutes and 32 seconds long.
Now there we go. And so that is so that's 1970 very much, right? This is the era of the burgeoning era of album rock and FM rock, where, like you're suggesting, a DJ could put the song on and then I don't know, go buy groceries and come back. Right. So 21 minutes. Oh my Lord. I've never heard it. I've never heard the album version.
No, I haven't either. No.
I just know the single. I bought, when I was a kid, I bought this single in a cutout bin. It's actually one of the first singles I ever bought. And I think I bought it.
Oh, okay.
You know, I kind of think I have a memory of sort of buying it by accident, but remember thinking it's super cool.
That happened to me a couple of times.
Yeah. The other song from Rare Earth that comes to mind is a song called Celebrate. So for me, you know, Rare Earth, which, you know, I don't know that they had really an outstanding career. Maybe you know more about this than I do.
Boy, they were around forever.
They
And
were,
had
absolutely.
all sorts of different lineups. The last album that they made was in 1993, but they never, you know, this peaked at number 4, Get Ready,
Yeah.
and it was their biggest hit. The second album that they had, but it was the first album with Motown. And they just never really, for me, they're a one-hit wonder.
Largely, yeah, I would agree.
You know, they were around forever, but
I mean,
never really amounted to much.
arguably, I think their biggest achievement is this link with Motown. That you know, it's just there's something about that's important. And I don't know that it really went much farther than Rare Earth, but the fact that Motown was looking to branch out in that way, I think, is interesting. And to begin with Rare Earth.
Yes. Yeah.
So we have Rare Earth
Right.
at number 4. At number 5 is a song from the Moments called "Love on a Two-Way Street." The Moments.
The Moments?
Yeah, you and me both. I know the song a little bit. It peaked at 3 on the pop charts. The Moments had a number of popular songs on the R&B charts. They also morphed into a group called Ray Goodman and Brown. And Ray Goodman and Brown had a song in the late 70s called "Special Lady," which I actually kind of remember. "Love on the Two-Way Street" was also then recorded in the early 80s by a young artist, Stacey Ladislaw. I guess it'd been 1981 or something like that. The other thing that I think the noteworthy thing about "Love on a Two-Way Street" is that it was written by Sylvia Robinson and Bert Keys. This is just like trivia nonsense, but Sylvia Robinson was a prolific songwriter, and she was also a member of a kind of one-hit wonder group called Mickey and Sylvia, and they recorded something in the late 50s called "Love is Strange," and that may not ring a bell with you, but if you "Love is Strange," and we'll encourage people to chase it down, that's really quite a song. But so you have the Moments at number 5 with "Love on a Two-Way Street." At 6 is Simon and Garfunkel and "Cecilia," one of their many chart entries into the charts in the early 1970s. At 7 is Joe Cocker and his merry band of musicians. His take on "The Letter," the Box Tops hit from the late 60s. At number 8 is Creedence Clearwater Revival, double-sided hit, of course, "Up Around the Bend" and "Run Through the Jungle." CCR, of course, is a dominant feature on the charts in the early 70s. My God, they were just everywhere on the radio all the time. One single was as awesome as the next. It's really quite an achievement. At 8 is an experimental band, and they were experimental at this era. A band called Chicago, originally called Chicago Transit Authority, but shortened to Chicago, and "Make Me Smile" at number 8. Chicago emerges from the Northern Illinois music scene. One of the things that made them distinctive was the horn section, a very, very powerful horn section. Chicago in their earliest days, when they were just getting started, touring everywhere, they came across this artist called Jimi Hendrix. And Hendrix loved Chicago, and actually talked with the guys in Chicago about maybe even recording with something.
Wow.
Hendrix was particularly taken with the horn section. The other thing that Hendrix was taken with was Chicago's guitarist, a guy by the name of Terry Kath. And Kath was, an amazing player and frankly, an amazing performer. And it's Kath who sings lead on "Make Me Smile." The thing about Chicago, a couple things, is that they had a number of really incredibly talented people in the band. I mean, beyond musicianship, you had a number of songwriters. Robert Lamb, Peter Cetera, who then sang later in the group's career, Kath, and the trombonist guy, James Pankow. And Pankow, in fact, wrote this song, "Make Me Smile." He wrote a number of their hits. So there was a lot of creative energy in Chicago. And again, they oftentimes in their early career recorded very long songs, you know, suites. In fact, "Make Me Smile" comes from a suite called the Girl in Buchanan Suite. It's on their second album. And this song, "Make Me Smile," is extracted from that, as well as another hit of theirs, something called "Color of My World." It's, you know, they kind of defy categorization at this point. They are an R&B band, they're a rock band, they've got prog rock elements to them. They're a very interesting group. By the time we get to the late 70s and early 80s, they begin to really focus on ballads. I frankly think they've become less interesting. But in the early 70s,
that's the Peter Cetera era, right?
yeah, it's the Peter Cetera era, which doesn't interest me very much at all. But in the earliest days of Chicago, fascinating stuff and rewarding listening. And so I think many of us know the singles, but I'd encourage people to sort of take a deeper look into the level of musicianship in Chicago, particularly in this earliest incarnation, is just extraordinary. Now, eventually they lose.
Well, I may take that to heart. I have their greatest hits album, Chicago. Is that Chicago 9?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful album. But in terms of deep cuts, I really don't know any of their other stuff.
Yeah. So I just, I think it's one of the things I think that's important about our conversation is that, it can hopefully open up avenues for people to explore. And I just think the early Chicago albums, the first 2 or 3 in particular, are they're exceptional. And so at number 9 is "Make Me Smile." At number 10, it's those boys from Gary, Indiana, the Jackson 5, who just explode onto the scene. And it's just one hit after the next. And right now, at number 10, the Jackson 5 are charting with "The Love You Save," and the flip side, "Found That Girl."
Right. And you talk about one hit after another. This is literally the third of 4 singles that will hit number 1 in a row.
In a row.
They
Yeah.
released 4 singles, and all 4 of them become number 1 hits. The first one was "I Want You Back," then which we've also talked about, "ABC." Then this one, "The Love You Save," and number 4, "I'll Be There." ABC and "The Love You Save" were number 15 and number 16 songs of 1970. So
Huge hits.
they were just really huge. This is the peak of the Jackson 5 as the Jackson 5.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
And Motown was pushing them incredibly. They needed a new horse to pull the wagon. The Supremes, Diana Ross was leaving the Supremes, and they were actually using Diana Ross and Jackson 5 for synergy effects.
That's absolutely right. In fact, I think the first album, right?
The first album was Diana Ross introduces the Jackson 5.
That's it, exactly.
So, so there's that, and of course, it was a relationship that lasted. Michael Jackson was very close to Diana Ross, and that relationship lasted until he died. Anyways, they're very popular. "The Love You Save" may be your own. Of course, this is a play on the driver safety slogan, "The life you save may be your own." And "Stop." "The life you save may be your own." This "Stop," of course, is also clearly a quotation from the Supremes' "Stop in the Name of Love." The legend had it that Diana Ross discovered the Jackson 5. That just isn't actually true. It was clear that was for marketing purposes. Do you know who actually brought the Jackson 5 to the attention of Gordy?
I don't know. I think, go ahead. I'm not sure.
It's Gladys Knight. Gladys Knight.
Oh, I think, yes. Okay.
And Bobby Taylor was their first producer. He was producing for them first brought them to Motown and said, "Here, I've got these guys," and Gordy felt that the material from the first album was too adult to give to a group of that age. You got to remember, these guys were, well, with the exception of Jackie, who was the oldest, they were all minors when this was coming out.
Oh yeah, right.
Jackie was 19 years old. Tito was 16, Jermaine 15. Michael was 11 years old, 1970, when this was a #1 hit. And this did become a #1 hit. This peaked at #1. So just incredible. It sold, Jackson 5 sold more than 100 million records worldwide. So it was an absolute powerhouse. The flip side of this was I Found That Girl by with Jermaine Jackson singing the lead. Maybe a reference to Hazel Gordy, the daughter of Barry, who he ended up marrying.
Oh, my darn. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So basically saying, "Hey, Mama, I found the girl that you're talking about, the special girl that I needed to wait for." That's the trope that this falls into, the "Mama, you were right" trope.
Yeah. Well, just a question about that. Obviously, Michael Jackson became the first among equals pretty early on, but this is still the Jackson 5 as the 5, right? That there still is at least the notion that these are all brothers, they're all contributing, and you have multiple people, singing lead and that kind of thing. And that's fair, right? That Michael has not been the breakout star, but that comes pretty quickly.
Well, it's clear that he is the main attraction. I mean, you have this 10-year-old, this 11-year-old kid just singing the hell out of
that's right, absolutely,
some songs, and it is incredible. These all of these hits that they had were produced by Motown, by the corporation, the Motown's hit machine, essentially.
No, that's it.
And unlike a lot of Motown stuff, which was produced in Detroit at Hitville, USA, the Jacksons were recording in Los Angeles, where Barry Gordy had relocated.
Yeah.
For what it's worth.
This is so the Jacksons, Jackson 5 are, as you've said, I think that they're the zenith of their fame as the 5. This early 70s. At some point here, they are a part of a Saturday morning cartoon, which became enormously popular. And and they're in all sorts of fan magazines and all this kind of thing. And so they're really just a ubiquitous presence in American life. 1970.
They had a rivalry with a white group. See, who was that?
Well, I think you're talking about the Osmonds, and I'm not sure. The rivalry thing. I know what you're saying. I don't know, and maybe it was cast like that. They seem to be appealing to maybe different audiences slightly, but
although there was it's like the Stones and the Beatles. There were people.
Okay.
In the sense that there were people, they had bands that were definitely for one or the other, but there was a lot of crossover as well.
Yeah, for sure. And
in fact, the Osmond song "One Bad Apple," one of their biggest hits, had originally been offered to the Jackson 5, and they didn't do it. But
and the Osmonds, of course, had their breakout figure as well, Donny Osmond. I mean, they have all those brothers, but it's Donny Osmond who becomes the star. Much in the way I think with the Jacksons, Michael Jackson. I think.
Yeah, he was also very young, right? When they
I think so. I think I don't think it's slightly older than Michael, but still very young. And so all this is happening in the early 1970s with these brother bands, brother acts. Okay,
so that rounds out our top 10.
Yeah, so let's just, if we could cherry pick from a few other things from the charts, just some things that were on the radio at that point. At 14 is a group called White Plains, which won't ring any bells with anybody. They had this song called "My Baby Loves Lovin'." And White Plains was essentially a kind of studio creation, a British band. This song doesn't get much higher than 13. What's interesting about White Plains are some of the members of the group, because they become very familiar figures in music, popular music, over and over again. White Plains was a kind of studio creation of a guy by the name of John Carter, producer. John Carter had a hand in a group called First Class, which had a hit in the early 70s called Beach Baby. John Carter also then helped to mold the Ohio Express. Again, had a hit, a bubblegum hit, Yummy, 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 Lovin' My Tummy. The lead singer for White Plains is a guy by the name of Tony Burrows. Again, these aren't necessarily household names, but the thing about Tony Burrows is that voice sounds familiar is because, well, you heard it all the time. Tony Burrows sang lead on this song. He sang lead on First Class's Beach Baby. He sang lead on
Wow.
Band's United We Stand, Divided We Fall. He sang lead on Edison's Lighthouse, Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes. I mean, Tony Burrows.
Oh, that's that guy. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
He's just, he's everywhere. And there, you hear those songs and think there's something quite, it sounds familiar.
He was like on tops of the pops with 3 different groups.
That's right. No, that's exactly right. Yeah. And so Burrows and Carter are sort of the breakout figures. This song was written by Roger Cook and Roger Greenaway. And Cook had his hand in a whole bunch of songs too, including a couple that one that we've even referenced today. Cook wrote "I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing."
Okay.
And Cook also wrote a song for the Hollies, something called "Long Cool Woman," which is
oh yeah.
And what's interesting about that is it's very different from
oh yeah, it is.
But so you have White Plains at 14 with "My Baby Loves Lovin'." At just 17 is a song from the Sandpipers, lovely number called "Come Saturday Morning."
Yeah, "Come Saturday Morning." I remember liking it back then. It's just, well, okay. The Sandpipers was a folk rock trio. They were best known actually for their cover of Guantanamera.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
They had a top 10 hit with that in 1966, a transatlantic top 10 hit. But they came back with "Come Saturday Morning." Interestingly enough, not this single, but the song was released twice on 2 different singles. The first one was with "Pretty Flamingo" as the B-side, debuted in December '69 and peaked at 83 in January.
Okay.
70. It was reissued with "To Put Up With You" as the B-side and re-entered the charts in April and peaked where it's at now, 17.
Yeah.
This was actually a song that was written for a movie. The music by Fred Karlin, who was a composer. His career was composing music for TVs, shows and movies. He has more than 130 scores. His claim to fame was "For All We Know." Right, that received the 1971 Academy Award for song for "Lovers and Strangers," and the Carpenters had a top 10 hit with that.
Absolutely.
The lyrics were by Dory Previn, and "Come Saturday Morning" was also nominated for the Oscar, but lost to. All right, here's a trivia question: Who won that award in that year for the 1969?
Is that Raindrops?
"Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head." Very good. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, this song was for the Sterile Cuckoo.
Sterile Cuckoo, yeah.
And one of Liza Minnelli's first film roles.
I've never seen Sterile Cuckoo. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it. What I read about it makes me think it's so depressing that I don't feel like.
Yeah, that's right. But it's widely considered like one of her best performances, if not her best.
I think I like Liza Minnelli as an actress. I really think she is everything I've seen her in. I've liked her in.
Yeah, I must admit, I really, and Liza Minnelli in this era she was really important. She was, you know,
Well, this was shortly before Cabaret.
shortly before, right? But just shortly before. But yeah, so Sterile Cuckoo. Ah, that's right. I've never seen it though.
Here, one other thing about the Sandpipers that's really interesting for me. Um, they sang in English, Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, and Tagalog.
Tagalog, it's Philippines, right?
I guess.
I think that's right.
They had 7 separate album entries in the Billboard 200 from 1966 to 1970 and over a dozen charted singles.
Well, yeah,
I had never heard of them before.
yeah. I mean, I'd only heard of them from this song. I would assume that if in that era, if you could sing in multiple languages, that would obviously open up doors for you in a variety of places and really push album sales. I mean, even the Beatles did that kind of thing in the early '60s with their German numbers, a couple of those. So
yeah,
Sandpipers. I think it's it's a kind of gauzy number. It's very atmospheric. It's very much of the time. I kind of like it.
It's almost hard to listen to now.
Do you think? Okay.
Yeah, I like I said, I enjoyed it back in the day. I think our school choir even sang it.
I'm certain that, of course, yeah. I mean, given that or Long and Winding Road, I think I would take the Sandpipers. But
oh God,
okay. Oh my Lord. Okay, so we have Sandpipers at 17. At 21 as a British group, they kind of remade themselves at least once, if not twice. It's the Moody Blues with Question.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an interesting group and interesting song.
The Question was written and sung by Justin Haywood, and it would be later featured as the lead track on their A Question of Balance album, which was also critically very well received and it was a commercial success. It #1 in the UK, #3 in the US. The Question was a fairly long single at 4:55.
Yeah, and there's a couple tempo breaks too that make it unusual. So it's long and it's almost a kind of challenging listen in a way for a single.
But the interesting thing about this is also you talk about them trying to remake themselves. It was kind of in the sense of the Get Back project. The idea. Get away from all the studio stuff, all the layers, and just simple, something that we can play together in concert. So this was one of the first singles that came out of that effort. And it seems to me this is also kind of in the same theme as the Johnny Cash, What is Truth? The voice of youth cries, what is truth? Well,
yeah, for sure. I see that.
Why do we never get an answer when we're knocking on the door? I want to talk about peace a little more and that sort of thing. So, so there's that. The idea that it's a little bit more political than they had been up until then.
I think that's right. Oh, absolutely. But it also sort of in keeping with the Moody's. They had this sort of kind of philosophical kind of edge to them. There were songs. They were sort of a thinker's band, a kind of deep band. Some people thought of them as sort of almost sophomoric in terms of their approach to philosophy and whatnot. But they're kind of, it's kind of interesting. They have certainly a kind of prog element to them, prog rock element to them,
right?
Which isn't so apparent.
Yeah, Rolling Stone had a fairly devastating critique of A Question of Balance in this sense. A very tongue-in-cheek. Oh, it's like prophetic, and it's my eyes. And then, why can't they just play some rock and roll?
Right. Well, Rolling Stone. I mean, yeah, they were never a critics. They were never a critics band, but they had a long career. I mean, a long career. They sold a lot of records. But this '70s output is, yeah, very
Well,
kind of
question is, this is also one of the songs that's on every one of their compilation albums.
absolutely.
They played at every concert. It was their second highest charting song in the UK, and still is.
I think, yeah. I think, to be fair, I think that the Moody's had more success in the U.S. than they did in Europe, and their success in the United States came early with Go Now, and then even into the 80s. I mean, they were charting in the United States for 25 years.
Yeah, they had a lot of good stuff.
I think so too. To me, it's an interesting band, and Question as a single is kind of oddly compelling. I mean,
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
So we have the Moody's at 21 with Question. The only other song that we want to really reference this morning is a song that's charting in the 30s. It's Diana Ross's first solo effort. It's Reach Out and Touch.
She charted in January '70 with the Supremes.
With the Supremes, right? But as a solo, yeah, you're right. And so at this point, she had extricated herself from the Supremes. Boy, what a saga that was! I mean, again, people who are into girl groups know this, but the whole girl group scene in the 1960s was very important. But the Supremes was this just kind of roller coaster of rivalries and lineup changes, and it was, and Diana Ross was always at the center of it. Kind of diva's diva. Ross extricates herself from the group in '69, starts to record, and goes out on this solo effort. And the song is, frankly, a little disappointing. It peaks at 20. Reach out, touch someone. Reach out and touch somebody's hand. Written by Ashford and Simpson. Ashford and Simpson, sort of legendary songwriting duo. And I think for some people, there was a real concern that Diana Ross maybe could not operate as a kind of singles artist. I mean, initially, there was a lot. This is a devastating single. I mean, if you read the commentary that surrounds this particular song, it's less about the song itself and less about the performance and all that, and more about how it charted or didn't chart, or its sort of lack of popularity. And there really was a sense that maybe she didn't have it as a singles artist. So it was a relief to many, including Ross, that a couple of months later, for the same album, same debut album, Ain't No Mountain High Enough hit number one. And of course, from there, then Diana Ross was a kind of a rocket ship. I mean, Diana Ross, as a solo artist, had 6 number one singles. She was an actress of some renown, particularly in the 1970s. She was nominated for Best Actress in Lady Sings the Blues. She was a kind of a force in entertainment, a kind of force in culture. She was an enormously important figure in the 1970s. There was a sense that she was pushing for racial inequality, racial equality, gender equality. She was sort of the star. I mean, there were few people more important in music than Diana Ross, but it gets off to a kind of slow start with this particular song, Reach Out and Touch Somebody's Hand.
Well, her fans loved it, and they still do. I think it's also, when she does concerts, she can't leave this off.
No, I think that's right. And it has become a kind of, once again, we mentioned it becomes a kind of a secular hymn. That there is something about this that is the song of healing, song of reconciliation, a time of great strife. But it didn't just really connect with the public in the way that you thought it would. But Diana Ross, this is the start of her career as a solo artist, and she's still at it, and she's, I think, still important. So those are the songs of note from mid-June 1970. And we will continue our trek through the charts and through the 1970. Here soon, we'll start to talk about July. It's going to be a long, hot summer in 1970. A very interesting time in American life. Dave, you got a couple of thoughts in closing here?
Yeah, just let us know any of your thoughts. We'd be happy to hear from you. So just right below.
Yeah.
Again, we have playlists that you can listen to parallel to listening to the blog, and subscribe here. And we'll see you next month.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, now.